Okay, I shall call the meeting to order of the Wisconsin Rapids Waterworks and Lighting Commission monthly meeting. Since we haven't met in a long time and we have a new commissioner, how about we'll do a roll call and we'll start with Todd.
So Todd Weiler, Director of Engineering and Electric Operations.
Jeff Kuhn, Finance Director.
Jay Bemke, Council Representative.
Rick Martin, Commissioner.
John Bergen, Commissioner.
John Harper, Commissioner.
Tom Novak, Commissioner.
Jim Brown, General Manager.
Sean Reimer, Conservation and QCall.
Dale Schuneman, Water Superintendent.
Amber Danielski, Auditor from Clifton Larson Allen.
Matt Storman, Information Systems Administrator.
Lynn Shore, Customer Support Supervisor.
Tyler Sleen, Electrical Engineer.
Josh Elliott, Line Superintendent.
Roxanne Gronsky.
Okay, thank you. First order of business, we'll do the approval or addition corrections to the meeting of the last commission meeting held on April 14th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from John Bergen and a second from our other John. All in agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have an action item today to review and approve of the 2020 audit.
So every commissioner, they have a copy of the audit in front of them, and then I put just a PowerPoint that Amber's going to be going through. So Amber Danielski, she's a director with Clifton Larson Allen. She's been there, been working on our audit for at least the last 9 years, likely more. Done a really good job, and she's just going to walk through the presentation, answer any questions you might have, and then kind of go from there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amber.
Sounds good. As Jeff said, I just want to go over the PowerPoint. It summarizes a lot of the data that's in the bigger packet, and since that packet starts ending up being closer to 100 pages these days, I like to go over the summary version first instead. It starts out just on page 2, discussing our responsibility. We follow generally accepted auditing standards and governmental auditing standards. The governmental auditing standards adds a few layers on of looking at a little bit more into your compliance with laws and regulations in addition to the generally accepted auditing standards. And so we do follow these standards to provide an assessment of your financial statements as whether or not they present fairly with
Point of order. Could we allow the speaker?
Yeah, you want to do that? Excellent. Yeah.
That works. So we review the internal controls. We don't go super in-depth in your internal controls, but we do review them to determine how extensive our audit procedures need to be and what sample sizes we need to do, what areas do we need to focus on more or less. And so we come up with that risk-based audit approach. And then we express our opinion on the financial statements based on the results of that test of samples. For 2020, there was no change in accounting rules or accounting policies that were impacting your financial statements. This is important to note because GASB, the Accounting Standards Board that your financial statements follow, is coming up with lots of different changes. There's a lot of new things coming down the pike. In the past few years, there's been a lot of different things. You know, your Wisconsin retirement stuff had to be shown differently in the past few years. And now going forward, you're going to have some stuff different with debt. You can have some stuff different with leases, and potentially they're looking at even how deferred comp plans, 457 plans are being shown. So it's important to know whether or not the statements have changed significantly from year to year due to changes in those accounting standards. And for 2020, happily to say there was no new standards that made a big impact on your financial statements. Other items that can make an impact on your financial statements are estimates. You know, you buy a truck and you hope it lasts 5 to 7 years, but you know, sometimes something happened and it lasts only 4, or sometimes it holds out better and it lasts 10 years. Well, the accounting standards have you basically write off that cost over a series of years, and so you come up with an estimate. You figure it's going to be 5 years, it could be 1 year the other way. So there's just some numbers that could shift and fluctuate from year to year because there's some unknowns out there. So capital assets are your biggest one, and then you have your Wisconsin retirement pension balances, the other post-employment health insurance benefits, because obviously health insurance fluctuates from year to year, and the number of people staying on after retirement versus ones don't, that all plays into the estimates with that. And then there's, your allowance for uncollectible accounts. When residents can't pay, you estimate, how much of that will you still ever be able to collect and what you won't. Sometimes your estimate is a little lower than what it was, sometimes it's a little higher than what that ends up being. So those numbers can fluctuate from year to year. The other information in your financial statements, beyond your basic financial statements, are your required supplementary information. This is specific information related to the Wisconsin Retirement Pension and OPEB health insurance and the OPEB life insurance. There's extra schedules required that give you up to 10 years worth of data so you can see a historical trend for that information and know if significant assumptions have changed with that data over those 10 years. Moving then to page 4, we had no major issues with the audit. We appreciate Jeff and his team. This year's been a little bit different where we've done more virtual than anything else, including the audit. And we've used some technology where they provide us the data electronically through a secure portal. And we appreciate all the effort that the team did putting that stuff and getting it together for us in order to be efficient in our audit. And we did come on site, I think, for one day to look at some stuff that's just not feasible to be done that way, but we appreciate all the cooperation that his team has given us during the audit. As part of our audit, turning to page 5 then, is we had no corrected misstatements. So we didn't find any significant adjustments that Jeff had to post to his financial statements that were significant enough to make a difference. A lot of it has to do with, at times, adjusting between how the PSC wants the data reported versus how the accounting standard wants it reported, because there are differences. And that leads me into the uncorrected misstatement. One difference between the PSC reporting and financial statement reporting is financial statement reporting wants your investments reported at fair value. So what's it worth out in the marketplace today if you wanted to go and sell it and redeem it? Is there a gain that you would be recognizing on it, or is there a loss of what you're being recognized on it? And the PSC doesn't want you to show that difference. They want you to keep everything at cost and not have those fluctuations from year to year. The Accounting Standards Board does want to see that amount in there. So this year, the amount, we analyze that amount every year because that standard happened, it was GASB 72, it happened a couple years ago. We have certain thresholds that if that amount crosses an amount at a certain threshold, we consider it material enough that we need to put it in the statement saying, it's a big enough amount, but we're okay that you passed on it, but it's big enough that the board should know about it. And it is just a difference between the two accounting basis that way.
Yeah, and I think, it would be a different discussion if the utility would actively buy and sell these securities, but we're holding all of our securities to maturity, so this unrealized gain will never really be realized, which is one of the main reasons, other than the PSC saying, this is not something you record, on why we don't put that in our financial statements. Like Amber said, this is something we passed on in the past. However, just with the interest rates reducing so much this year, this unrealized gain from having investments with a higher interest rate kind of put that over that threshold.
But it may be realized as well. You're saying it'll never be realized?
Well, it would only be realized if we sold an investment prior to maturity.
Yeah.
Which we have not historically done.
So you're saying that if you buy a $100,000 bond, you're supposed to, the PSC wants you just to always book it as $100,000.
Correct.
And if it goes, the interest rate after a year is $101,000.
Right.
The accountants want to see that,
1,000.
that you have $101,000 in the investment.
Right, but the PSC just wants to see that 100,000. I mean, vice versa, if, next year if it goes the other way, interest rates go back up, or all of our investments mature, that gain of $115,000 goes the other way and it's a loss because you don't have that difference between book and market value at that point. So it's really just a paper or gain or loss at that point, and really nothing that's affecting our rates, and that's ultimately what we're looking at.
Okay, question, why wouldn't you realize this gain and reinvest?
Well, it's not actual gain. I mean, it's an unrealized
Well, it
gain.
is gain. If you sold it today.
If we sold it today, we would get that gain, but then the corresponding investment that we would purchase would have a lower interest rate.
But
Below
you'd have-
what you
but- But you'd have a higher,
A base to,
yeah,
true.
so you really should look at those things.
We can work with Ellers to see if there's some opportunities there.
I mean, really,
Talk to them.
you have Ellers, you said?
Yep.
They're doing all these investments for you.
Correct.
And it's really up to them to determine that, since the interest rates went down and the bond price probably went up,
Right.
that maybe we should look into something else.
Right, we can-
Isn't I take it we're paying Ellers to do this.
We do.
And, I mean, that's something that they should be doing anyways.
Exactly. So I
Tell them we
will,
want them to do that and get back to them.
I will bring that up to them and see if there's any opportunities for us there.
And what is the threshold you were talking about, once it gets a certain threshold?
When we're designing our audit test, we kind of do a calculation of, we kind of start out by a certain percent of total assets is our big threshold. And then we kind of break it down. A third of that is then certain amounts, and then like a tenth of that kind of truly get down in is what we call clearly trivial amounts. So if it's above a clearly trivial amount, we think it's borderline that it could be important that the readers should know, the board should know that it's this amount. If it was below that clearly trivial amount, like it's been in the past, like here your amounts were 64,000, 54,000, I believe for 2020, the amount was somewhere around 30,000 was our clearly trivial threshold. So if the unrealized gain loss would have been below that, we wouldn't have even disclosed it in there because it's truly trivial from the total balance of your 100 and some million in total assets. It's just more of a, we use those thresholds just to give us guidance on, is this getting, from a quantitative perspective, big enough to point out, or big enough to propose an adjustment on. And obviously, especially, that's what comes with doing certain investments versus just putting it all just in straight CDs or stuff like that. That's where the difference comes in, is when you're doing more municipal bond investing or, even treasury securities and different things like that, you're gonna get more chances for having these unrealized gains or unrealized losses just because it's the volatility of the market. I mean, we've seen even the past few weeks, the market is up and down, but that's where it's just important to understand that you are investing in those to hopefully at some point, if you needed to, divest early and maybe get some gain, but if not, keep your funds invested.
Yeah, I can see if it's, cumulative on 50 different investments, then it's not gonna be worth
Right.
doing it. If it's in a couple of significant investments, then it's probably worth taking a serious look at.
I will contact them and see if they have any opinion.
Any questions, any other further discussion on that? If not, we'll go to page 6. Overall, the results of our audit showed that we agreed that the financial statements present fairly. So that's your clean opinion. We're not disclaiming the opinion, we're not giving a bad opinion. We're giving what's called a clean opinion, which is what the commission strives for their financial statements. From an internal controls perspective, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we consider material weaknesses. However, like I said before, we don't go overly in depth into your internal controls, so there still could be some deficiencies out there, but from what we looked at, we didn't see any. And then from the governmental auditing standards perspective, when we look at your compliance with laws and regulations, we did not note any issues with that. Page 7 is a summary of the rate of return for the electric utility and the water utility over the past 5 years. As you'll see, the electric utility in 2016 started out just about 7% and has dropped to just under 3% at the end of 2020, while the water utility has fluctuated between 2 to 5% over the past 5 years. And these rate of returns were pulled directly from the PSC annual financial report.
And just so everybody remembers, we did have a rate case that we put in 2019 that was not effective until October of 2020. So 21 and for the next couple of years should be back up in that higher rate of return than where it was in the last couple of years.
Then the last item I have before opening it up for questions is discussion on the new accounting standard that's coming up. In regards to leases, the accounting standards are changing where they want more information on your financial statement regarding leases. Whether you're leasing equipment to use in your operations, or if you're leasing and getting rental income from third parties yourself. This goes into effect for your 2022 statements, and it represents another difference between what the PSC wants reported and what the financial statement properly accounting principles want reported. And we're mentioning this now because what we're hearing in circles throughout this country is it's taking a little bit longer to analyze all the agreements than what somebody would think, because there's what's called embedded leases, where you might have a copier agreement where it's kind of a mix. You're leasing the copiers, but then there's also a printer service contract buried in there. So you have to actually segregate the components because the copiers themselves need to be reported differently than the maintenance agreement. And there's other things that they've talked about, like do you have a coffee service? Do you have what's the other one that they were talking about the other day? Water coolers. Do you have a Culligan rental thing going on where we're getting the water jugs brought in? Is there with vending machines or cell phone tower leases, and just it's taking time to go through and analyze all the different contract agreements to determine if they do meet the new definition of lease and the accounting rules first, or if they don't. And then the accounting form, once you've identified which ones you do have, you have to do present value calculations, and they're adding footnotes. So I would say there's probably another 4 to 6 pages added of footnotes to be added to the document once you know how many leases you have, and that might be on the short end depending on how many leases you actually do have. So I wanted to make sure the board was aware of this. Jeff has had conversations with our team about this, and if it comes down to it, we do have some professionals on our national team that we can hook you guys up with and work on an agreement to help assess those agreements.
So is there any material nature in terms of, it has to be a certain size, or, it seems ridiculous to think about having to worry about a copier versus I get $1 billion of oil and gas equipment leased.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It comes down once you've assessed it all. If it's, if you only have like 2 years remaining on the lease and it's only $50,000, just document that it's not material to your financial statements, and we'll review your calculation and determine if we agree with it or not. What we found is, for a couple of them that we're doing it, is like even the cell phone tower leases, if you have additional 5-year renewal periods, by the time you get to a 20-year period, it might actually be a bigger dollar amount than what you even think it is. So it's going to come down to assessing the different agreements and adding it all up and seeing how material it is.
I would assume our cell tower leases would be the ones that would have an impact on us.
The big ones for us where we're the leasee is the tower rental and our pole attachments to our telecommunication companies. So those will be the two where we'll be hitting more. Where we're leasing equipment, it's going to be more office equipment and the copiers and the mail machines and those kind of things that are going to be more minor equipment.
Yeah, so obviously, I had one county that was looking at their postage machine, and it was only $3,000. So they just said, no, we're not gonna track it, we're not gonna change it. It's just, and from your financial statement perspective, it's not, it'll be interesting, you'll have receivables and you'll have payables, but on other financial statement things, it's more of also changes how you budget for it, because they want the payment on those leases when it's a liability to be shown as principal and interest and not just kind of buried in with office administration or office or operating expenses under a department. So for an enterprise fund, it's going to be more booking the receivable and booking the payable, where other funds, like on the city side or on a village side, you're going to have to change how you budget, and instead of budgeting them up in public safety's line item, they're going to have to be budgeted in debt service kind of thing, just so they want it standing out so the readers understand how much you're spending on these type of agreements and how long they last, and even the interest you're charging on it. And if you don't know your interest rate, if your agreements didn't say it, you're supposed to use your current incremental borrowing rate, which right now would be really low if you're borrowing for anything, but as that fluctuates, that's going to also change the value of your leases.
What generated the need for this change?
I'm not really sure. I will say that this is getting it more in line with the commercial business corporate accounting rules for it, and with international accounting standards. They're all kind of trying to get it all on the same page. And before, you used to have this distinction between operating leases versus capital, where you're using it more to finance that purchase, and in 5 years you're gonna own that asset, or is it truly more, just for operations? You're not gonna keep the copier, you're gonna replace, swap it out for a new one at the end of the agreement. That was causing some differences of interpretation, I believe, where more people were saying, oh no, it's operating, when it probably was that you were keeping that asset instead. So I think they wanted to try and get everybody on the same page.
Thank you.
And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Maybe a question for Jeff and Jim. Management has omitted the management's discussion. Any particular reason?
The MD&A, I believe the city does an MD&A in their financial statement, maybe not. The users of our financial statement are 90% in this room right now, and then it rolls up to the cities as an enterprise fund. So the MD&A that would go in here is probably, the amount of effort it would take to put it together, would be the discussion we would have here, and that would pretty much be where that would go, just because there's not a lot of users of our financial statement.
We've never, at least as long as I've been here, since 2008, we've never had one.
Never had one. Yeah. So the utility is not there.
Right.
And if I can add to it, there's a lot of governments out there that don't. There's even counties that don't. So you're not unusual in the fact that it's being omitted. We just have to point out that it is.
If we did an annual report or something like that, then I think it would be important to include it, but not in just a typical audit.
Right. Okay.
I have a question about, on page 29, detailed notes on all funds is about the pension plan. And towards the bottom of the page, it makes an assumption of a 1% increase or decrease of the current rate, that's 7%. And it says the commission's proportionate share of net pension liability. I guess I don't understand what that means.
So this is related to the Wisconsin retirement system, which has all the municipal members for it. So what Wisconsin retirement does is based off your takes a ratio of your contributions compared to into all the members' contributions and comes up with your proportionate share percentage. And then multiplies that times Wisconsin retirement's liability or asset as a whole and comes up with what your share of the asset or what your share of the liability would be. So at the end of 2019, because this always uses there's always a 1 year timing difference with this. Wisconsin retirement was overfunded by 102%. They were at 102% instead of 98% or whatever it was the year before. So you're in an asset position. They're technically overfunded. So if it would, in theory, dissolve, your share would be $750,000. If it was ever truly underfunded, like it used to be way back in the early 2000s and 90s when they've actually made you pay extra in, if it was that liability side, then you would if they needed the money, you'd have to contribute that extra in. And so they use a discount rate of 7% because that's the return on their investments. But what it's saying is if they only ended up getting 6%, your proportionate share would swing to a liability of $2 million.
I see.
Or if all of a sudden their investments did way better, your asset proportion would be $2.8 million. And so if you go to page,
Is that the page 6 restricted net position?
that's a good chunk of it.
Yeah.
That's a good chunk of it. If you go to page 42, the top part of that table shows what the commission's proportionate share has been ever since this accounting rule of having to show Wisconsin retirement like this has been. It started out as an asset, then for 2 years it was underfunded at 98, 99%, and then it went, the past few years it's been back and forth, back and forth. But the important part to see is that Wisconsin retirement's in the past 6 years hasn't been below 96% funded, which still leaves it in the top 2 states, I believe, in the nation.
Yeah, there's only 2.
So, yeah, that are that well funded. Everybody else is in the mid-50s or lower. So what that means in the long run is, yeah, they change your rate, you know, one year I think you pay 6.75%, the next year you might pay 6.65%. And you're not having huge swings where now all of a sudden they want you paying 10% in order to cover up that deficit. So it swings, but it's not too bad of a swing right now. And depending on how the market goes, has been, I'm assuming when you see the 2020 numbers, it'll be pretty similar to what it was for 2019. Just because the market was high enough that I believe what their investments are going to show is that they've had gains.
Thank you.
I just wondered why when you showed it in the restricted net position category, that it wasn't shown for the previous year.
This is where the accounting rules get a little crazy. You only get to show it as restricted net position if it's an asset. Yeah, if it's a liability, which it was in 8 the year before, you don't get to show it as part of as a restricted balance. It eats away at your unrestricted in those years. And so unfortunately it will flip-flop back and forth.
Page 7, amortization of deferred charge on refund.
Okay, back in 2015, I think it was, the commission refinanced debt and it was paid off ahead of time, if I remember correctly. And under the accounting rules, when you have to pay extra, when you're paying it ahead of time just to save time costs over the long run, you basically amortize, you divide that over the next 5 years, 10 years, and just eat away at that adjustment instead of showing one big hit in 1 year.
Okay. How much more of that is left?
There is there's $563,000 left in that. It might be the debt that's related to it.
Which was in 28.
So yeah, it'll be done in 28.
Okay. Page 8, when you look at our tax level, how do we compare to other similar municipalities?
I would say it's reasonable. It's obviously based off your total assets. So whenever you do a big project, that amount would then grow. You know, if you all of a sudden added that amount. But it's pretty comparable for an entity of this size in this geographic region for what I've seen for the couple other, especially the electric utilities that I've seen. Some of the water utilities, in some of the smaller municipalities, they've had different things get frozen. So, you know, the city might cap it at a certain amount, but, and then analyze that every 5 years and decide if you want to change that amount. But it's pretty comparable to what I've seen in the past few years.
Okay. In the outflows and inflows of resources, major swings between 20 and 219. What's the reason for those major swings?
Majority is that whole Wisconsin retirement thing, switching from being 98% funded to 102% funded. What they do when they do that is some of that net difference, they don't have you hit all in 1 year on your financial statements. They have you amortize it over 4 years. So you'll have a big swing in your deferred outflows and deferred inflows, and then you'll eat away at that over the next 4 years. And so when it switches from the asset to the liability or vice versa, especially that big of a swing, it's 4% swing, it's gonna cause those numbers to go big.
Other questions for Amber?
I guess maybe for you too, Jeff,
Sure.
accounts receivable. uncollectible 537, is that just related to our current allowed deferred payment situation, that it's so high?
So the utility practice has always been to reserve everything we write off. So when we write off that amount, we have a reserve for uncollectible account. So that's kind of the accounting entry there. And then when we collect it, those kind of net against each other. So essentially what that's telling us is we have 500 and, what's number 568 of accounts written off at this point that are still being actively worked. So we reserve for it, you know, kind of worst case scenario, we're not gonna collect any of that, that's what the financial statements are showing, but we are gonna collect it because we're actively working most of that debt.
That number should start being lowered each year, thanks to the help from the city council starting in 2022.
Yes.
Good.
Talk about the custodial credit risk. Where do we have this 494,000 as of December 31? Is it someplace where we have any concern?
What page are you on, John?
18.
I believe it's just a little bit extra that was sitting in the checking, but without having the details in front of me, I don't.
There's, you mean the 494 excess of state depository insurance limits?
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing, a lot of them are just CDs that might be, you know, 255,000. The other one would be, there's a money market account at Ellers that kind of holds while we transfer, while funds mature until they're reinvested, sit in there. So that's not FDIC insured, and that's going to be the majority of that amount.
But it's not any place that you perceive any significant risk.
No.
That pretty much covers most of what I have.
Anybody else got anything? Yeah, we need to approve it.
I'll make a motion to approve the audit report as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, Rick has made a motion to approve the audit, and John has seconded. Is there any other comments, questions? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
if you have any questions, my contact information was on that last page of the slides, along with John Troutman's. So if there's any questions, just feel free to reach out to one of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No. Okay, how about we'll proceed to safety committee minutes. Are there any comments? Need anything?
He's listening.
You were going to share some of these procedures with us, and we haven't seen one yet. I see you're revising fall protection. I think previously there was one in the area of enclosures.
I can scan a couple of the procedures as samples and just email it to the commission and deal with that.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, line superintendent report.
Tom, real quick, I do have an award to present to the crew and commission over there.
Okay.
Every year MUW has their Safety Excellence Awards that we do. So every year I fill out those nominations. It has to do with more of the electric side of things with our organization. And yeah, you guys won the gold one this year. So kind of presented it to Josh and the crew. Just for doing the work that they're doing, staying safe and doing a good job, so.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Is that the best it could be?
That is the best, that's the top level award, that's the gold level award, so.
No platinum level.
No platinum level.
Or diamond.
Just a huge rock.
Very good.
So Josh, can you explain again, I might have asked this before, what's the part power?
It's usually a bad connection, so if you have two wire to a normal house 120, 240, one of them would be missing. So half your panel will be lit up.
And when do the squirrels become active again?
Shortly.
About now?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. I think we're in squirrel season. Yep.
Any other comments? If not, let us go to the water department operations report.
Dale, how often and when does the, I'm not sure what you call it, the summary of test results come out?
Once a year, I think.
Once a
Water
year.
quality one?
Yeah. And what time of, is it spring, summer, fall?
Usually in the fall.
In the fall, okay.
Is that paper my wife brought home from the library talking about the water quality and the contaminants in the water? I don't know if you've
It
seen
has
it.
lead levels, it has all
Lead
that.
levels, yeah. Did you know that? You'll be getting phone calls shortly, your name's on it, with your phone number.
Somebody comes for it or whatever, what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that usually comes out, deadline for that to come out is July 1st, we always get it in early, so it's out there and published already. Is that on our website?
Are there any other comments?
Then is that on our website?
I'm sorry.
Is the consumer confidence report on our website?
I think it is.
So it is on our website,
Oh,
if
okay.
you're interested in looking at that.
I think it's under water quality.
Is there anything else at Dale? If not, let's go to the customer support supervisor.
Nice to see the numbers coming down again. And thank you for the explanation on the 90-day. What are those arrangements looking like? I see you have 2 failures, but 2 out of 189 is still pretty good.
It is really good, but most of the arrangements are not due yet, so I think that number is going to increase next month.
Yeah, they're too soon to tell.
Most people don't enter into an arrangement until they're actually up for disconnect. So,
And the 75 disconnections, is that above or below what you were expecting?
this was a hard year to predict anything at all. So, I mean, I'm happy that we've made the progress that we've made so far.
Yeah, that's very encouraging.
On your office payments, you have, you note that around 55% of our electronic, to use the electronic option. And which of these are these? Is that the iView and the EFT?
Yes, the EFT is our program, and it's probably the cheapest program we have. But like Pay Now and Smart Hub, all of those are electronic payment options.
Okay, what is the iView?
Well, if somebody goes on Smart Hub and pays
Okay,
with the iView payments, or you're talking about the ones in blue?
the ones in blue, yeah,
Those are-
37%.
Yeah, those are the payments that we receive in the mail that we just process.
Okay, okay.
So yeah.
And then almost everything else, well, almost everything else, cash register, of course, but all the other, from EFT, Smart Hub, Pay Now, and Smart Hub Mobile, those are all electronic payments.
Right, and that has increased a lot this last year, mostly because we were closed. So it's nice to see, I hope it continues.
Sure.
It's nice to see that it's
It's less
continuing.
expensive for us to process payments that way. So I guess if there's one good thing about the pandemic, that was it, because it reduces our
Yeah, that's good.
customer expense.
Do we accept credit card?
We do,
We do.
Yeah, and there's no charge if you use the Smart Hub.
right.
There's no charge for either, so you can
Okay.
build up your miles while paying for your.
Yeah, I get it. Are there any other questions of Lynn?
Well, this 264 and 101 water moves, that seems high.
That's normal for the spring.
Is it?
It is very normal,
So folks are moving.
yes. And they usually wait until the weather gets better and then they start to move.
Amazing. When did we actually end up, oops, I'm going ahead, I guess. I moved.
Did you move on to the next page?
Yeah.
Would you like to do this? I guess we all through with Lynn. If not, we'll move with John to the Director of Finance report.
Well, some discussion about this bad debt write-off proposal. What's the logic and advantages, and then how would we tie the commission back into knowing what's going on?
Sure, I think, you know, the two big reasons why we want to do this is to maximize the collections we can get. So if we are trying to get to these people 90 days after, you know, they're done with us and past due, we can send those on down to Madison, down to SDC. They can work to collect these people while we still have a good address, while they're hopefully still in the state. And while we're kind of getting ahead of anybody else that may be waiting for fall and then going to the TRIP program or something like that, because it's kind of first in, first paid kind of thing. So if we get in a little bit earlier, that might help with some of that. On the same token, it's likely going to minimize some of the potential landlord exposure. If we can get after these people sooner, if we can collect this money, then it's less money that potentially landlords are going to have to pay from their tenants that moved out, you know, after not paying their bill and skipping out.
And we
So-
can give you quarterly reports as far as what we set down there, and that would be kind of like your write-offs.
Okay.
Yeah, we can put that in there easily. So the idea is to, you know, if we're doing, you know, 30 at a time as opposed to 300, it's going to be a lot less taxing on staff too, that they can kind of fit it in, and it's not onerous on them.
And I was speaking with Jeff and Lynn about this, we probably should have been doing this a while ago. And it's just always been commission practice to wait till it was basically
Big number.
approved by the commission, and the quicker everybody knows, the quicker you click on that, the quicker you're gonna get it back.
There's nothing in bylaws or anything that's,
I rechecked once we did that the first time, and we got such good success, we started to do it. And Lynn had noticed a lot of people, when we started giving them the disconnection notices, a lot of people started moving out of landlord properties, so she talked to a couple that got stung, and it just makes sense for us to do this and speed the process up.
I like the proposal. Do we need a motion on that?
because it's not in our policy.
Okay.
Change in business practice.
Just
I mean, the only time it's gonna be more of a hassle, which I kind of mentioned in here, is if somebody moved out, they left a debt with the utility, they come back in 3 months and say, I want service, reestablish service in my name. If that debt is down with SDC, down at the Department of Revenue, they need to deal with them because Department of Revenue charges the debtor for any collection fees that go with it. So if they owe us $1,000, they're gonna owe more to the Department of Revenue, so then we get $1,000 back. So the Department of Revenue really does not want us taking that payment from them. They want to deal with them at that point because they've been actively working that account and should be compensated for that. So that's gonna be the few, we talked about it, it's not a large number that it's gonna hurt, so that's kind of why the benefits definitely outweigh the risks and the issues.
Well, it'll definitely guarantee payment if they want electric service.
I would agree.
I think we should pursue it. Any other questions of Jeff?
Yeah, I do have a question. So if this goes into the trip, or if it goes into that, is Rapids the only, if they try and get you electric in Point or somewhere else, no go until that bill is paid, is it just to our utility?
It's just to our utility. We can only hold them to our utility. There is state statute that says if you owe another Wisconsin utility, they can request a deposit. And there's some ways they can find that information out, but like the IOUs, if they move to Point or Port or something like that, they're not going to be using those. Alliant Energy isn't using those, or they don't have the same rules. So they wouldn't have that requirement of having to pay us before they can get service.
So if they came from Point with a delinquent bill, we may not necessarily know that, or Marshfield or wherever.
We would know that because we do like a soft credit check, it's called. There's a company we use called Online Utility Exchange. As long as companies are reporting to them, then we get that information. So we'll see that they might owe Alliant Energy, a past due utility bill, and at that point we'll tell them you either need to give the utility a deposit or pay that past due bill.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Jeff? If not, we'll move on to the Information Systems Administrator report.
So have you gotten any inside scoop into the Colonial Pipeline thing in terms of how that?
Nothing more than is in the news already.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing more than that.
You're not seeing any, there was also this water breach in Florida. I read that the government is mandating some changes. You haven't seen anything, no outreach?
They haven't brought anything through channels to me yet.
Okay.
But the Florida breach, we don't have any of that software that they actually breached in through. So none of that's installed on our SCADA system.
I got nervous this last Sunday when I saw a guy up on top of the tower.
I noticed you called. Yeah, it was unusual they'd be working on a Sunday on Mother's Day.
That's right.
But they were, because they weren't leaving town. I guess they stayed here the whole time until they finished the project, so.
Right, rather than sitting in a hotel doing nothing, they keep working.
I saw the guy up there and he's actually, I saw him lift the cover. I'm thinking, oh yeah, what's he doing?
It's empty, so.
Any other questions of Matt? If not, the Conservation Manager report.
It's kind of scholarship season. Did we do scholarships?
We did, and we did not receive any applicants.
Really?
No.
Wow.
So, the consensus with the high schools, and talking to the counselors, is it's down drastically.
Yeah.
Typical years, we received
probably 10 to 15.
Yeah.
In this year, I guess we received one but did not qualify.
Huh.
So
GPA wasn't on.
very disappointing.
And I know they've said that they judge by like the percentage of students that complete the FAFSA from like mid-state's perspective, and they said, that they know that's way down.
It is.
0, wow, that's not.
Yeah.
Well, it probably goes along with what you're hearing as far as kids either postponing college or choosing not to go.
Yeah.
Or waiting a year.
Well, if it's all still online or whatever.
Yeah, you might as well join an online university, it's all
Right.
online, right?
Yeah. Crazy to pay today's tuition for online.
Especially if it's private.
Has Lincoln been full-time in school or part-time school and home?
They are full-time as of, I think it was about 3 weeks ago.
But they've been part-time most of the year?
Yes, 2 days a week,
Okay.
yeah. So that hurt.
That probably meant something.
Yeah.
But the whole thing, like you said, about postponing college because of the problem.
Wow. Well, that makes up for the years where we gave multiple.
That's what I was thinking. That year you gave out 3 or 4.
Right.
So Sean, I appreciate you spending time with business owners and working with them to look at their energy bills.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to your visit with Jim Chase at Grace. They've just completed 420 LED light
They did.
changes,
Good. That'll help them out quite a bit.
And I see you're keeping up with that former commissioner's plan to fund one concert with the city band.
Yes, that will be back this year at Robinson Park on July 20th, Tuesday. It'll be on at 7:15 in the evening. Last year it was postponed due to the pandemic, so that'll be nice to see that back. That'll be our sponsor night.
That's great. So who was the commissioner that initiated that?
Remember, we changed the policy on that. Essentially, we provided out a dollar amount, I don't know, I think it's like $1,000 for me to approve, so anything over that will go to the commission, or any other requests that we had. But I figured we did this every year, they had it, so I figured it would.
But when Tom's comment, I didn't know when this started.
Oh, that's, the man passed away. He was.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I can't remember his name.
Oh, Mike Phillips.
Yeah. Mike Phillips,
Yeah,
how
that's
quickly
right,
it
he
is.
did start that, didn't he?
Yeah, he asked if we would do that. All right, anything else of Sean? If not, let's go to the Director of Engineering and Electric Operations report.
So the county's thinking about new jail? They've been talking about that for a long time.
Yeah, they have a firm that they've contracted to do preliminary plans, and so Josh and I met with Ruben and went over the plans and how that would affect the primary power and such. So I think it's still, a long ways out, but we've worked very close with Ruben through the years, and he wanted to get us involved early to get our opinions on things, which is a good thing. Yeah. I got a award ourselves, so not to outdo Sean with his state award, but we have the National Safety Award as well, which we took first place in. So that was our plaque that, I mentioned it last month in my report, but the plaque arrived for us to put in the lobby.
Any more awards and we're going to become Eagle Scouts.
Those are badges. Those are badges.
Guess you weren't an Eagle Scout, huh?
Is there anything at Todd left? If not, let's go to the General Manager's report. And I have a question. Could you explain the Great Lakes utility with your board in person with the, is it before the meter, solar?
Right. Well, the RFP had both before the utilities meter and after the meter. So we had bids for both of them. We didn't get near as many in front of the meter bids because of the MISO's backlog of projects. And we had a specified date we wanted the energy online. So that kind of inhibited a lot of the bidders because they weren't sure when they were gonna get the asset online. So we're gonna discuss it at the meeting, I think it's May 20th in our office again. Running another RFP for in front of the meter solar. Now this would be, we buy off a big wind farm, 20 to 60 megawatts, and then just throw that in the glue power pool. The behind the meter ones are 1 to 5 megawatt installations that members would install.
So what are we purchasing now? We're part of a group.
Great Lakes Utilities.
Great Lakes, no, I mean, but we're purchasing wind power, I take it.
We are, from the Lakes Wind Project, 50 megawatts.
50 megawatts.
So we're just adding more renewables to our mix. And most all of our contracts drop off, well, the MPU one will drop off in 2026, and then our longer term investor-owned utility contracts, one falls off in 2029 and one falls off in 2030. That's one of the reasons we filed the CA at the Public Service Commission to build the RICE units, which they haven't even started looking at.
So for the renewable power, are we at were we at 22 or 23% at one time?
I'll have to look at the renewable report. We just filed it with the Public Service Commission a couple weeks ago. It's required.
Okay.
So I'll see where we're at. We're way above, I think it's 10.5% is what the goal is in Wisconsin now. Now they're re-looking at all those things now to increase it. So we're well above that right now.
Or is that there's a goal at, let's say 2030, that you would do, let's say 30% renewable or something?
Well, that depends what the state does. We're not gonna do anything more than we.
Then you have to.
Correct, unless it makes economic sense, like these solar installations do make some sense to help us shade the peaks, and the prices of them have come down some, so. But the main reason the MISO is so backlogged is there's just so many renewable projects in front of them, and transmission owners are gouging them for putting in more assets than they probably need to deliver the energy. So there's a lot of flux and infighting going on at the MISO right now. So we'll see where it shakes out. But there's over 600 megawatts of power in the queues. Most, probably 2/3 of it's renewables.
Why would you elect for wind power addition as opposed to solar power addition?
Wind typically is further from our peak as a utility. So typically your solar is going to track our utility curve better as far as when we peak. So it shades more. Wind typically doesn't blow when it's hot and sunny. It's usually at night. On these wind farms, so yeah, we would not, plus, I mean, we won't invest in wind for the foreseeable future. It'll be PV, potentially some battery storage we're looking at as well, so.
Okay.
And we'll still contract a good portion of our load with bilateral contracts, because we'll have some of it, our own generation, and then continue to do these bilateral deals, because they're typically the lower price.
Good to see about the discussion with the mayor on the lining project discussion.
Anything else with Jim? If not, accounts receivable, or payable, I'm sorry.
most of the water and electric inventory on hand now? Or are you expecting much more?
I think we got quite a bit more coming in, right?
Do you?
Most of the water is probably in, I mean, that usually comes in spring, but
You're
electric's
seeing
more.
delays,
Yeah,
okay.
Just to call attention to it for anybody that's viewing this online, whatever page is this? Page 3 of 5, total of what's called pilot payment in lieu of taxes to the city. Second installment of $668,000. How the utility supports the city.
Anything else? Somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.